desk. Lin signed the paper, releasing the hospital from any liability. Since she had no health insurance and refused public assistance, she could afford to stay in the hospital only for 24 hours. She'd spend the next 2 years paying $100 a month until her debt was paid in full. The woman behind the desk reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. "Here, take these. You might find them useful." Lin took the envelope, peered inside. Coupons for diapers, formula, baby lotion, and anything else one might need. She gave her a wan smile. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Throughout her pregnancy, she had visited the local dollar store once a month. She'd purchased generic brands of baby items that were on the list of layette necessities she'd read about in the baby book given to her by her obstetrician. Lin didn't have extra money to spend on a homecoming outfit for the baby, so she'd gone to Goodwill and found a second-hand pale blue sweater set. She'd carefully hand-washed it in Dreft detergent. Subsequently, it had looked good as new. Someday, she swore to herself, her son wouldn't have to wear second-hand clothes. The orderly wheeled her back to her room, where she dressed in the maternity clothes she'd worn when admitted to the hospital the day before. She ran her hand across her flat stomach. Now she would be able to wear the uniform Jack required, thus saving wear and tear on her few meager outfits. She gazed around the room to make sure she wasn't leaving anything behind. Had it been only 24 hours since the taxi dropped her off at the emergency room? It seemed like a week. Lin carefully removed the sweater set, which she'd placed in her overnight bag. With ease, she dressed her son, smiling at the results. Will looked like a little prince in his Goodwill blue outfit. Briefly, she thought of his father and their week-long affair. What would his reaction be when he saw his son for the first time? After months of indecision, she'd finally written him another letter 2 months ago, the first one since she had been on her own, and mailed it to his parents' address in New York, the only way she knew to contact him. She'd begged Nancy Johnson, a girl Will's father had introduced her to, for his phone number as well, but she'd been adamant about not revealing more of her friend's personal life. She'd told Lin that if Nicholas wanted her to have his phone number, he would have given it to her. The harsh words had stung, but there was more at stake than her raw feelings. She had a child to consider. She'd written a lengthy letter, revealing her pregnancy, telling Nicholas he would be a father shortly after the new year. Weeks had passed without a response. Then, just last week, she'd trudged to the mailbox, only to find the letter she'd sent unopened, marked Return to Sender. What's one more rejection? She'd asked herself. Her father hadn't accepted her either. Her mother had once told her that he'd always dreamed of having a son. At the time, Lin had been terribly hurt, but as the years passed, she learned to set those feelings aside. She'd been the best daughter she knew how to be in hopes of gaining some kind of approval, and maybe even a bit of love and affection from both parents. But that was not to be. When she told her parents about the decision to keep her baby, they were mortified and humiliated. She'd been tossed out of the only home she'd ever known with nothing more than the clothes on her back. A soft mewling sound jerked her out of the past. "It's okay, little one. I'm right here." With the quilt Irma, Jack's wife, had made for him, Lin gently wrapped Will in a snug bundle. It was below freezing outside. Lin had half-heartedly listened to the local weather report as it blared from the television mounted above her bed. An ice storm was predicted. Meteorologists said it could be the worst in North Georgia history. With only 2 small electric space heaters, her garage apartment would be freezing. How she wished she could take Will to her childhood home. While it wasn't filled with love, at least it would be warm. But Lin recalled the torturous evenings of her childhood. She would rather die than subject her son to such a strict and oftentimes cruel upbringing. Every evening, as far back as she could remember, she'd had to pray while kneeling on the hardwood floor in the living room as her father read from the Bible. A die-hard Southern Baptist, who considered himself a man of God, her father had constructed a pulpit for himself in the center of the living room, from which he would gaze down at her with disdain, as though she weren't good enough. Then, if that weren't bad enough, he'd make her recite the names of all the books of the Bible in order. If she missed one, he would make her start from the beginning until she named them correctly. Once, when she was